You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. For previous episodes, visit thinkingcountry.com or find the podcast on iTunes or SoundCloud by searching for Meet the Farmers. Hello everyone and welcome to the show. This is episode 56 of Meet the Farmers. Before we crack on with the main show, I want to start with a few messages. I have some thank yous to make. Firstly, to the Mercy Charitable Foundation, who supported all of my recent road trip episodes, including this episode. You can find out more about them at themercycharitablefoundation.com. I also want to thank all the show guests who invited me onto their farms during my Cotswold and Welsh road trip. I cannot tell you how much I took away from the experience. There were lots of laughs. There was some emotion at times. It was quite difficult listening to some of the stories, as it is a pretty difficult time in ag at the moment, from TB to Brexit, and as you know, regular listeners, all the other themes that we discuss on this podcast. And I also got some free business advice, so thanks to everyone. I want to give a big thank you to Tom Bland, a good mate of mine, who gives up his time freely to help with production of episodes. And of course to all of you. Without listeners, this show wouldn't be what it is. This said, one thing I am trying to do is expand the audience of the show. And for this to happen, I'm going to need a little bit of help. So if you can do one thing, if you can share this episode with somebody who you know, I cannot tell you how much I'd appreciate that. If everyone shares it once, then we can double the size of the listenership overnight. So that would be absolutely brilliant. You can tell them they can subscribe to the podcast mailing list by visiting thinkingcountry.com. And of course, it's available on lots of podcast providers, including iTunes and SoundCloud and others. For now, though, let's head to North Wales for today's show, which features one of Britain's better-known hill farmers, who, in his own words, is living the dream, Gareth Wyn Jones. As soon as I arrived at the farm, Gareth took me up the mountain to give me some context to the place, and in the usual Meet the Farmers way, the conversation soon led on to other things.
So where are we standing currently, Gareth?
So we're up on Frith Madryn in Abergwyngregyn. We've just come up the Gareth Fawr and over, and the road we were travelling was built by the Romans.
How was it?
So that's the kind of history you're talking up here. And the Roman road, they come up through them trees here. And can you see the ancient tree line we have here?
Yep.
There's about 700 acres of ancient oak down here. That's all been left, really. And on this Frith as well, you can see there's quite a few trees as well. We tend just to leave them, and the cows really, really use them in the summer. Good shelter. So this is what we'd call a frith. Okay, the frith is the intermittent land from the open mountain to the good land at the bottom. So for the summer months, the cows will graze all this, and we'll take them in beginning of November, and then we'll bring sheep here just to keep the feg down, and then for hopefully the spring, there'll be a nice, fresh piece of grass for the cows to come up. And you've just seen how good they look. You know, they've had no concentrates. It's just off this green stuff. And cows are really, really important, I think, with the whole mixture for us. Sheep can take quite a lot out, and cows will always put something back in. Mm-hmm. So behind us is the Carneddau mountain range, which is 27,000 acres of open mountain. So this area, Aber, Llanfairfechan and Penma Mawr, is part of the Aber and Llanfairfechan Grazing Society, PLC, which I'm the chairman for. 22 farmers, all working together, Ben, to make sure that we've got a sustainable way of putting our sheep up there, watching after the wildlife, the nature, the flora and fauna. It's about just getting that balance right.
And tell me how that collaboration came about.
So in 2006, we were approached by the National Parks and then the CCW, the Countryside Commission for Wales. And we had a meeting, and they were very, very interested in talking to us about setting this society up. So we looked at it, bringing 22 farmers together to set up a PLC was like bringing two families that weren't getting on to get to a wedding and getting them to sit together. So there was a lot of fun, and we had to set up.
That's one word for it.
Yeah, but I think sometimes by bringing people together like that, you will find out what the problems are, and I think when you open the conversation, you talk about the problems, then you get them sorted.
Yeah.
When you talk about things behind people's backs and whispers, Chinese whispers, it doesn't work. It has to be cooperation, has to be working together.
And actually, thankfully, that there are more instances of this, certainly in England as well. There's the farmer cluster groups, more and more of those, and then also down in Gloucestershire, FWAG, Farmer Wildlife Advisory Group, they have a brilliant system as well, led by Jenny Phelps. So there seems to be more collaboration
It's the
going
way
on.
forward, Ben. It's definitely the way forward. And, there's been too much divide. There's been them and us. And I think when you bring them farmers together, and you can bring them conservationists in then, when they can put their tuppence worth in. So it's about getting that balance. So we've worked with all these people.
Or even dare I say, local people living in the village.
Well, they're always involved.
Yeah.
There's always been an involvement for them on these mountains, because I think that's an intricate part of the whole area here. And why I'm saying this is because we have the Carnedau ponies. So our local community will help every single year with the gathering of them. So they would have always had that local knowledge and wanting to be part of the mountain. And so many people will walk on these mountains and keep an eye on these ponies, They go back to the Celtic times, 220 breeding mares left in the world. And this is a little bit of a Jurassic Park, okay? This is how I look at it. Again, my family's been part of custodians of them for over 350 years. And it's very, very important that we watch after them. And you understand and learn as you go on the journey of life. And one of the things I've learned about these ponies is how important they are to other wildlife on the mountains as well, and the birds. We've got quite a rare crow, which is called the chough, that nests on the quarry over there. You can see that beautiful quarry.
Yep.
A lot of them nest there, and then they come here. Now, we've never given any of these ponies any wormers, so they're totally organic, and they have something special in their stomach which doesn't give them immunity, but they can have like a symbiotic relationship with the worm. And the ponies will graze differently to the sheep. So the ponies don't come off the mountain at all for the whole season. We don't give them any feeding or any extra nutrients. It's all from the grass. So where they're grazing there now, that would be an ideal spot for the chough. So it's a very, very short swath. The ponies will poo, and that poo will attract invertebrate. Invertebrate will go in there and break that down, but that invertebrate attracts the chough. And then the chough comes. So the circle, the circle of life for them chough is dependent on the ponies, dependent on us watching after the ponies, and dependent that we aren't giving them antibiotics or any wormers. So it's all about working together,
If in a case where you were to walk away from the mountain, what would happen to the ponies?
That's a really good question. We'd have most probably a few years where they would be, doing what they do. And then you would have inbreeding problems, the foals would get stronger and they'd be fighting. You'd have a lot of deaths, a lot more deaths than you do have today. You just need to keep control. They're semi-feral, but they just need that little bit of help, that little TLC. If one is up there and it's broken his leg, we take that straight away. We take it out of the equation. It's gone up, it's taken out with a high-powered rifle. And, sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. But it does needs man intervention to watch after them. This is why they've survived up here. They've been up here since the Celtic times. Man's always interacted with them. He used them. My great-grandfather used to buy them and sell them down the pits. They were a big part in the Second World War and in the First World War. They were used. These ponies have been used for so many different things. The farmland here what we call in Welsh the loesi, which would have been ploughed and turned. Well, the ponies would have been, and the horses would have been an intricate part for man to move forward on this type of land. And again, I think it's living history. We have to watch after it. So I think if man turned his back, if we turned our back on them ponies, I don't think they would have a big future.
Sticking with that theme, I've been talking with lots of people along the way on this road trip about rewilding, especially in North Wales. If you were to walk away from this mountain, what would the landscape look like?
I think it'd be totally different. You know, you're looking at it here now, there's a lot of different types of land we've just driven past. So we've got the gorse here, then you go a little bit higher, you've got the heather. But if you go up onto Llwydmor here, there's Montane Heath, which is a very, very ancient kind of vegetation, which goes back to the Ice Age. And it's still up there because we've managed that land properly. Now, if you take the sheep off there, the other grasses would just suffocate it. So it's getting that balance. You know, we keep sheep on here only for the summer months. So it's only 6 months of the year the sheep are up here. And then the mountain gets a chance to rejuvenate, recharge. And I think it works, you know, it's getting that fine balance. I know people will tell you, turn your back. Well, if you look behind, Ben, after the Second World War, this was all planted. Okay, so these were conifer plantations, and you can see what it's done to that mountain. You know, it was an absolute desert, nothing, absolute nothing. But if you look here at the ancient woodland, which has been there hundreds of years or thousands of years, all that's been kept. You know, we've watched after that. We've made sure it's there. So it's addressing that and keeping it, you know, by turning our backs. Man has produced what we do up here, but I think it's important that we do watch after it. And we are producing a very, very high quality food from these uplands. And we must remember, these mountains are storing so much carbon, a lot more than the forestries. It's tons and tons and tons of carbon up there, and we have to remember that. And when we put the sheep up there in the summer months, the grass is growing, the sheep are grazing the grasses, the heath, the bilberries, and that again, well, the regrowth will suck the carbon into the ground. So, you know, we have to look at all these scenarios. And for me, how many people make a living on this mountain? So we talk about 22 farmers. I would say most probably there is 100 people just off the top of my head that would be within that 22. There's 22 farmers, but the families, you know, I'm one of them, and I've got 3 children, I've got a wife, all them live off that. How many more of them are there? You know, you wouldn't only be turning your back on that, you'd be turning your back on my language, my history, my heritage, and it would be a sad day. I think there's so much divide in this country, from Brexit to veganism, however, whichever corner you look, the divides are massive, and we need to bring people together. Unless we open these conversations, you know, we'll never go forward. People are pointing the finger at farming, and I think mainstream media has been doing a lot of that lately, and I think it's unfair. I honestly do think it's unfair when they're blaming climate change on these cattle. Now you look at these up here, and you know, I was in London a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just thinking, you're blaming me? You're blaming me for this situation? You know, if you want to rewild somewhere, rewild London. You know, let's look at the two sides of the coin. We need to make sure that we're bringing our carbon footprint down. That's a definite, there's no two ways about it. But we always need to look how we're doing it. And for me, sustainable, local and seasonal is the way forward. And we have to look back at what our forefathers did. You know, food didn't travel. Food didn't do what they do today. You know, even a potato will have a 200-mile footprint on it. We have to look at how we can produce our food more seasonally, more locally, and get people involved with it.
Following this chat, we drove back down the mountain and headed down to the farmhouse for a cup of tea, where I asked Gareth to tell me a bit more about the farm itself.
Okay, so we're an upland farm here in Tynllwyddan, so it's been in the family over 350 years. Very, very sustainable way of producing protein. I grow all my own vegetables. We have our own honeybees here. We've got something very, very unique, which are the Conwy mountain ponies here as well. I'm a big believer in conservation, watching after our wildlife and the flora and fauna. And as well, I'm a big believer in farming, producing food in a natural way, in a sustainable way, in a seasonal way as well. I'm a big believer in local food, and getting people involved in that. I think, we have to look back to the way that we used to farm 50 or 60 years ago. The smaller family farm would have been producing potatoes and turnips and carrots and, eggs and... Yeah. Milking a few cows, and it was a really good time. I know that's all changed, but I think sometimes, we're all rushing around and trying to catch our own tails by doing things. Sometimes we have to slow down and look what's around us and how can we better ourselves. And I think by eating healthy, locally seasonal food can be a good start to a lot of stuff. And there's some great producers out there and some fantastic people that are doing this already.
Tell me about life growing up and perhaps some of the people who've influenced you along the way, giving you that passion.
Giving me that passion. Well, my father still gives me that passion every day with a size 10 at my ass, excuse my French. No, he's 83 and still working, maybe some days harder than me. Very, very healthy, fit man. Very lucky to have him, taught me everything I know. These farms are hefted farms, so, the sheep are put onto the hefts every day, and I believe I'm hefted as well. You follow in your father's footsteps, and I think that's important. But as well, you put your own stamp onto your own side of the farm, and my father is very outgoing, not afraid to say what he means, and he will tell you straight. Sometimes he can be too straight with some people when you have to rein it back. I'm quite outspoken, but he's another 2 notches up, Yeah. But that's a good thing. I think, when we look at politics and people today, everybody sits on fences. I think it's very important for us to be honest with ourselves and put our point over, even that you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. I think the main thing is be honest and to go home at night and to sleep to think, I'd rather have said that to somebody's face than to say it behind their back.
How has the farm changed from, say, when you were growing up to where you're looking with the business today and moving forward?
There's been a lot of changes. We've developed a lot of different things here over the last 10 years. I've been very, very fortunate to go out and do the television work I've done and meet some amazing people from some really, really big companies. And it inspires you when you come across these people and you get an understanding of how businesses adapt and develop. And, the last 4 or 5 years, we've had immersive tours on the farm. We work with Rick Steves. We've just done another few tours with another company called Janet Redler, Dream Escapes in London, and there's another couple of companies we're working with as well. That's a big, big thing for us now, thinking of my son's on his last year in Harper Adams. So if there is an opportunity for him to come back, we need for him to have a good income, It needs to be sustainable. And I think, to have 3 generations on the farm, plus we're in a partnership with my cousins and my uncles, it can be difficult. So I want Shaw to come home and maybe have his own little piece of the farm for a bit, so we can understand how businesses work, how we can adapt to situations. Brexit's going to be challenging. There's no 2 ways about it. I think, for the upland farmers, we really don't know. Well, for any farmer in Great Britain, we don't know where we're going to go with it, which direction. I think it's very important for us to be still connecting with the consumer and our customers. And for me, I think, another big change in our lives is social media. you just called me the selfie king, and there's a reason for that, because I take a lot of selfies. But as well, I'm a believer in opening the farm gates, bringing people into our lives. 80% of people are living in cities, have lost connection with how food's produced, lost connection with the seasons. And you've seen I grow my own vegetables here, and I wouldn't be able to grow them without the cows that produce the manure to put back in the soil. All these things are the circle of life, and I want people to see that. I want them to understand.
Let's turn to your TV and broadcasting stuff. How did that start, and why did you decide to take the plunge and go into really having more of a public image?
So most probably I was doing telly in 2003 and 4. Did a few bits, a programme called Big Country with BBC Wales. And then 2009 I did a Welsh S4C programme called The Ferm Factor, where 10 farmers went head to head on this programme, which was a great laugh.
Yeah,
it was an absolute fantastic bit of fun. But my big break was Snowdonia 1819. BBC Wales, big production. I went to do the interview, and there was 2 families taken back to 1890, and it gave me a sense of how far removed people were from farming, agriculture, from animals, from the whole scenario of that food just comes in a tray in a supermarket, and they'd lost that. And that really gave me the drive to go forward and make programmes hopefully that could make the difference, from farmer and the food chain to the milkman to the Hill Farm, which was an occupational documentary in 2013, where the BBC followed me for a whole year, and it would have to be the worst ever spring that we could ever have. But I'm so glad that it was.
It's going to say, in some ways, that's the best possible thing to have been shown.
It was difficult at the time, but when you look back at it now, and I say this quite often, but sometimes there's a cost to food production, and I'm not talking about the financial cost. I'm talking about the physical, the emotional, and the mental cost that comes to that farmer, the pressure that they're under, the weather, supermarkets, government policies. All these pressures add up, and all we're trying to do is produce food for other people, and do it in the most sustainable, affordable way we can. And these were the things that really drove me to do more telly. And I was lucky, I worked with some amazing people. Steve Robinson and Luke Pavey, they were the guys that mentored me, they took me on that journey with them. I was nearly strangling Luke outside the Tesco's in Haverford one day, because he was trying to get me to get these last bits he wanted to finish the programme. Yeah. And I just wanted to go home and do some farming. And you do cross these bridges, you meet these people, but, we're the best of friends. I've been very lucky with BBC Wales and S4C as well to give me them opportunities. But in my heart, I'm a farmer. I'm a country person. I love that, and I do a bit of television work and radio work as well. And I think we have to put our head above the parapet every now and again, and fight for what we believe in. And one of the things that really this year has really resonated in my memory and made me feel, even the small voices like mine and yours can make a difference. So in March, I was sitting in there having a glass of wine with my wife on a Friday night. Phone goes, bing, Twitter, one of my mates, have you seen this guy? So we looked at it. So Boohoo had said that they're not going to be putting any woolen products in their clothing range. I'll be honest with you, me on a Friday night and a glass of wine on Twitter is not something that you want to see. So she says, the boss, Mrs. Jones says, put that bloody thing off. So it goes off. Before I switched it off, another ping, and it was PETA. PETA were sending a tweet out to congratulate Boohoo for putting this tweet out about not putting any wool in their clothing range. it really got to me, because whatever your beliefs, whatever your diet is, you know, wool is ethically a lot better than anything I can think of. You know, it's grown in a low carbon way, or even a carbon neutral way. You know, it's a byproduct, no sheep's killed. And when they mislead people, and people will jump on that bandwagon and listen to these people, and they've got millions of followers, a lot of power, you start to thinking, that needs to be addressed. So Saturday morning, got up really early, jumped on the quad, headed onto the mountain, took a few sheep concentrates, threw them behind me, laid on the floor. If anybody seen me, they must have thought I was absolutely bonkers. I'm laying on the floor on the top of the mountain, sheep behind me, and I did the 3-minute video about why it was important to shear the sheep, you know, for its health, and why wool was such an amazing product, and we should be celebrating it and utilising it. Came back down on the bike. Before I got into the house, my phone had gone, and it was Sky News. And I said, because I'd put it out there into the Twitter sphere and to the Facebook page.
It's amazing how quickly things are picked up.
Seconds. You know, really, we're talking about minutes. And it was one of the guys I'd worked with before with Sky during 2013 in the snow. And I said, we love that piece about the wool. Would you do an interview? I said, yeah. When are you thinking of coming? Now, today. I says, okay. So Saturday dinner time, I'm on top of that mountain doing a live broadcast with Sky News across the world. You know, that was the power of social media. By the end of that weekend, Boohoo had retracted their statement. And now Boohoo have got wool in their clothing line. And PETA have just been taken up by the Advertisement Standards Agency and lost their campaign where they were saying wool is just as bad as fur. So they've lost that fight. So for me, okay, that wasn't doing, but for me, I think we have to fight for what we believe. Even sometimes if we're wrong, we have to get up there and we have to fight. Because as an industry, farmers are very, very good at producing things. And we just put our heads down and we carry on. But this is what supermarkets and governments have always wanted. They don't want that interaction. But today, we've got our way, our route into people's houses through social media. So we should use it. We should connect with people and we should drive that forward.
Do you think the media have a set way of creating stories, and does that help or hinder the farming industry?
I think sometimes when we get these reports out, people can sensationalise things, and by sensationalising things they can mislead other people. I think we need to have facts, you know, and I think we need to do more research. I think Bangor University at the moment, a guy called Dave Chadwick is working on some fantastic stuff. If you ever get the opportunity to go and talk to him, he's amazing. There's a lady called Non Williams there as well. She's doing brilliant stuff with the uplands and cattle grazing. And these things we need to look at. There's no two ways about it. You know, we all need to bring that carbon footprint down. But when they take, you know, like the IPCC's report and then they just focused on one thing, and the report was a lot bigger, you know, I think they have to be careful. They really have to be careful. It's the same as the stuff about wool. Once you start misleading people or you plant that seed, people then think, oh yeah, we can save the world by not eating red meat. I think we can save the world by eating grass-fed red meat and looking at locally sourced, sustainably sourced food in all aspects of life. And we all have a role to play in it. You know, we can't hide away from it. And you know, because I grow my own food, and I say this quite often, and I'm attacked quite a lot by people within the vegan regime, I would say, that more creatures will die on my little vegetable plot, a quarter of an acre, than the rest of the farm. And that's a fact. You know, even if it's the aphids or the slugs and the snails or whatever the creatures are, there is a cost to everything we're producing. There's a cost to everything. Something will die for us to eat. And we have to live with that. But what we really have to do is look at the way it's produced. If it's produced in a healthy, happy environment, it hasn't done 1,000 miles to go to the abattoir. It's taken and dispatched locally you know, and that will share within the community. And that's not just for meat. I mean, for veg, we can't have a 200 round mile trip with potatoes. You know, I've seen it with these big supermarkets. I've done it on Farmer and the Food Chain. I've followed the potato 200 miles, and it ended up 5 miles. That's my phone. And it ended up 5 miles.
That's staying in.
Yeah, that's the thanks.
That's too good a ringtone to leave out.
and that stayed 5 miles from where it started from before. So that shows you how food travels and how we should be addressing these situations. It's the procurement, it's the way that all these supermarkets should be looking at themselves, and they should be sourcing more local seasonal produce as well.
What's your gut reaction with the future for lab-grown meat? Because in some ways you can liken this to the GM debate.
Yeah.
That the public have actually cordoned onto that, and the public have an opinion on GM. The public have opinions on various other items within farming, but also there is also this price factor. If lab-grown meat can be grown, inverted commas, at a cheaper price, do you see that as a threat?
Well, I don't see it as a threat. I think if there's a market out there and people want to buy it, because we can see what Beyond Burger has done in the States. You know, it's grown massively. Shares are worth millions. You know, people have jumped on that bandwagon. But again, it's ultra-processed food. In 10 years, are we going to be seeing people having illnesses from it? You know, we've got an obesity problem in this country now, and a lot of that is down, and diabetes, a lot of that is down to what's in our diet, because it's sugar. That's what it is. It's overuse and over processed food with sugar. You break that down and take things back to the natural sources. If you get leeks from the field, you have some lamb, you have some potatoes, put that in a stew and eat it. It's nothing going to be healthier. Nothing than sticking some, I don't know how they're going to do it with growing the lab, but there's a lot of people, you know, you've got Bill Gates, you've got Richard Branson, these people are throwing money at it.
There's a lot of money going into it.
Exactly. And I think we have to be open-minded about it, and if there is a market, people will buy into it. But for me, you know, we have to fight our corner and be honest with people and make sure that they have that choice, you know, that meat's there for them and it's brought up in the best possible way, so people can have an understanding that when they're buying that leg of lamb or rib of beef, they know where it's come from, they know how it's been produced, and they know it's to the highest standard and quality that they're ever going to have. And it's good for the environment and a low carbon footprint. You know, people then might go out and spend £50 or £60 on a rib, or £30 or £40 on a leg, and maybe eat a leg once a week, or a rib once a month. But it's sustainable, you know. I think sometimes when you have 4 burgers for $1, there's something given somewhere. So we have to respect that animal, use every single bit of it, but as well, we have to have a fair price for it. And when you cut corners and push cheap food, that's when we have problems. And I think it's getting a level playing field and a fair playing field, so everybody has a slice of that cake from day one, from the farmer to the end processor or supermarket or whoever it is. Everybody has a fair piece, because I think recently that hasn't been happening. There's been a lot of people that have been taking the cream off, literally.
Yeah. Something I've been speaking with all farmers along this road trip about has been particularly about the uplands, a vision for the uplands, and that's both in terms of how the landscape's going to look in the future to the people element as well, so communities. What for you is the best way of keeping strong rural communities in the uplands?
It has to be a living environment. It has to be a living, working environment. You know, we need the cattle and the sheep here, and we need people here. We need youngsters here. Average age, I think it's 57, or even I've heard people say 63. Yeah. That's scary because it's a young man's game on the mountain. The last 3 or 4 years, we've had to pay shepherds come in to gather the mountain with us because the generations are getting older and there's less people there. And it's an art, you know, it is an art living up here. We've been pushed up here to make a living, and it's not the easiest place to make a living. And, you know, people say, wouldn't it be easy just to turn your back and move away from it? No, I don't think so, because the ecosystems, our language, our future, you know, it's a traditional, sustainable way of producing a very high quality protein. And I think we need to remember that, and we need to celebrate that. And maybe, you know, we should be paid a little bit more for it as well. You know, that people are not only just buying a leg of lamb, but they're buying a piece of Welsh history and a piece of Welsh tradition, and a really environmentally friendly way of producing food. And you know, if we can get people involved and understanding this, I think there will always be a future for people up here. There has been problems, you know, there's been overgrazing in some areas of Wales, but you look at the broader picture now, the biggest problem, I think, is undergrazing. And places are going that, you know, we've seen it, that'll never see sheep again.
Because perhaps if we can lead on with that to what you think the biggest threats are to Welsh ag, specifically in the uplands, but to Welsh ag at the moment.
Well, it goes down to government, doesn't it? Government policies, that's what will drive the end of what we're doing up here. You know, we have to have a conservation regime, but we do need to be flexible with it as well. You know, we have to have an understanding that the people that are working the land know how that land the best. Okay? If you've been here 350 years, you haven't raped and pillaged, you've always put back. You know, one of the things my father's taught me from a very young age is we're supposed to leave these places in a better state than what we've had them. You know, that's the ethos of my family, and that's what we believe in. And sometimes when you had headage payments, you know, government would have just gone for numbers. So there was a lot of sheep at certain times, and there was overgrazing. But now the problem is that they've taken so much sheep from the uplands, it's a job to get them back. So let's get that balance right. Let's work with government. Let's work about these policies. Let's be more flexible. Let's have an understanding of Mountain A won't work like Mountain B, or you can put 300 sheep there for a week, or you can't put 50 sheep there for a month. You know, these things all need to be addressed with the different areas and the different vegetation that are on the mountain as well. So getting them balanced right, I think, are very, very important. And opening that conversation with government, with these policy makers, it's very important.
Right, we're going to finish the podcast in the traditional way, which is with the 1 minute soapbox, which goodness knows how this is going to work with this, but yeah.
I get 1 minute to go on.
Listeners, this gives guests 1 minute to talk about a subject of their choice. It could be anything at all, farming or non-farming. It could be a local cause. Gareth, have you got an idea of a subject that you want to talk about for 1 minute?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you about the Carnarvon mountain ponies.
Perfect.
Okay.
1 minute on the clock. Your time starts now.
So the Carnarvon ponies have been up here since the Celtic times. My family's been custodians of them for over 350 years. They're unique, they're special, they're magical, they're mysterious. You know, they were running up here when the Romans were here. And I just want people to take some time, come over to the Sychnam Pass or Abergwyngregin and just see them. You've seen them today, you can see how beautiful they are. And it's very important for us in the future to make sure that there are Carnarvon ponies running there again for the next 350 years.
20 seconds.
They're beautiful, they're magical, they're mysterious, and for me, as somebody growing up, they were a big part of my childhood, and I love them to bits, and I hope to God that they are allowed to roam up there forever.
Bingo. Gareth, thank you so much for giving me some of your time this morning. It's been amazing seeing this farm. It really has. A real privilege and pleasure. Stay strong for the month ahead.
We always stay strong.
Gareth Wyn Jones. Next time, on the final leg of my Welsh podcast road trip, I'll be speaking to mixed farmer and fellow podcaster, host of Rock and Roll Farming, Will Evans. Big thanks to the Mercer Charitable Foundation for supporting this episode, to Tom Bland for aid with production, and to you, of course, for listening. And once again, a plea for you to share this episode or another podcast episode with someone. If everyone gives it a share, it'll give all these farming voices a much wider reach, which is sort of why I'm doing the podcast in the first place. Please also subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss another episode. I look forward to you joining me next time on Meet the Farmers.